Deep in the barren heart of the Middle Eastern desert, there's a story whispered among soldiers, an account so chilling it's been dismissed and buried over and over again. But every so often, someone recounts the tale, shaking visibly as they recall what shouldn't exist in our world. What happens when duty meets the unexplained, when the desert itself seems to fight back? Brace yourself for tonight's story. The Shadows of the Desert Soldier, here on the Nightside Archive, where darkness reigns supreme and reality is a fragile thread. This account begins back in 2003, during the height of operations in Iraq. American troops stationed at an isolated outpost near the ancient ruins of Assur, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, would soon bear witness to something they could neither fight nor understand. These ruins, said to be as old as time, were once the seat of kings and deemed sacred ground. Yet for these soldiers, the ominous site was just another lonely landscape in a seemingly endless deployment. That is, until the wind carried the voices. At first it was faint, just the shrill howl of the wind playing tricks on weary ears. But by the third night, the sounds moved closer, and the indistinct whispers became coherent. Names, the soldiers' own names. Private First Class Jacobs was the first to react. He stormed into their makeshift command post and swore he heard his late grandmother's voice calling to him from the dunes. With shaky hands and a pale face, Jacobs confided to his squad leader that he felt compelled to venture outside, against regulations. That same night, one of the perimeter guards vanished entirely, leaving behind only his rifle and a deep set of footprints leading into the desert. No ordinary predator leaves no sign other than untouched weapons and an eerie, unbroken trail. Hushed concerns around camp quickly swelled into full-blown terror when another soldier claimed to have seen a figure standing just past the perimeter fence. It looked like Sergeant Hughes, a man who had died in combat weeks earlier, his face eerily void of expression. An investigation into the sudden disappearance of their guard revealed nothing. No obvious signs of struggle, only the unsettling pattern of footprints leading far into no man's land. Who or what was responsible? As the days wore on, the sightings continued. Faceless figures loomed on the horizon at twilight, always just beyond the point where scopes could focus properly. Radios crackled ominously with static, broken intermittently by human-like coughs and unintelligible murmurs, even though no transmissions were being sent. A palpable tension gripped the outpost, amplified by the desert's isolating silence. Base Command dismissed the occurrences as hallucinations, symptoms of dehydration and exhaustion. But was that really enough to explain the spectral voices or the shadows seen walking through candle-lit tents in the dead of night? The men wrote it off as superstition, until Corporal Lee broke rank and admitted the unthinkable. He claimed that during patrol, an entity, for lack of a better term, had come to him. A figure wrapped in tattered robes, its body radiating intense heat. Lee swore the figure whispered verses in ancient Aramaic, a language he could only identify after later researching it. How could he possibly know it spoke the language of biblical times? Days stretched into weeks, and paranoia began to seep into every waking moment. Then came what is now considered the final straw. It happened during one of the rare stretches of downtime in the evening. Some soldiers sat in tired silence while others tried their best to distract themselves with a deck of cards. Then the lights flickered. A storm wasn't predicted, and the generator was functioning just fine. But that's when they heard it again, the whispers, now accompanied by faint shadows moving across the dimly lit sand. The shadows didn't seem to correspond to any physical object or person and moved in defiance of the flickering light. 6 men armed themselves and ventured out, determined to get answers. They followed the shadows out past the ruins and toward a dried-up riverbed. Reportedly, everything felt wrong. The air buzzed with static electricity, and the night carried a metallic taste. And then, as if to mock their bravery, the shadows began to shift again, shifting and forming human outlines before disappearing in unison. Hours later, the same 6 men returned, dehydrated, disheveled, and shaking relentlessly. They collectively refused to say what they had experienced during their trek, but within days, 4 of them requested transfers to safer posts, while 2 were deemed unfit for duty and sent back home. Their mission logs, when reviewed, described no actionable enemy contact that night. But here's where the story takes an even darker twist. 2 years later, a construction project near the ruins unearthed an underground burial chamber containing human remains, relics, and what seemed to be tablets engraved with ritualistic incantations. Historians theorized that the burial ground was either cursed or protected by ancient guardians. The area was sealed off, and to this day, soldiers recount their tales only with trembling hands and frightened eyes. What did those soldiers encounter in the desert's shadows? Was it the collective weight of ancient history crashing into the present, or something inexplicable, an entity guarding the sand-bound secrets of fallen kings? Some say the shadows still wander near Asur, waiting for the next soul reckless enough to cross their path. So, what do you think? Coincidence? Exhaustion-induced hallucinations? Or something far more unsettling? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, stay sharp, because sometimes the night watches back.